We didn't really get a chance to do a one-on-one last week, so let's just start real easy. Samsung choosing Taylor. How you feeling?
Well, I think it's great for Central Texas, and we were happy they chose to expand in Texas. I know they were looking at Arizona and New York, but I think what's interesting is that the Chips for America Act that I introduced, bipartisan, Cornyn in the Senate, has really laid kind of the foundation for these expansions. We're seeing, Samsung 17 billion, and that's just the start of it. I think you're going to see probably over time, probably close to maybe 100 billion. And what's a very small town, Taylor, but it's going to be a bigger town, I'm sure. But you're also seeing other companies like Intel, based upon the optimism that, we got Chips for America authorized on the National Defense Authorization. It's very important for our national security to have these advanced semiconductor chips manufactured in the United States. But that's given them the optimism to invest in U.S. expansion. Intel, IBM are looking at a $20 billion investment in the United States. I know Micron is doing the same, and many of them are all looking at the Austin area as a place to do business.
Now, speaking of the CHIPS Act, you introduced it, or it was really introduced last year and passed last year. The funding finally approved, at least in the Senate, back in July. What are we waiting on?
Well, it's going to happen. And the reason why I'm so optimistic is, in a town where you see a lot of acrimony, this is probably one of the most bipartisan bills that we've seen this Congress, and it's probably will have significant impact on the future of our country, both economically and from a national security standpoint. I mean, it's supported by, not only Republicans like me, but I introduced it with a Democrat from Silicon Valley, and you get the speaker's support. You also have, obviously John Cornyn. You have McCarthy, the leader, supportive, and then Chuck Schumer with Global Foundries in New York is very supportive. We had a meeting in the White House, the Oval Office, with the president, automotive manufacturing members of Congress, and technology ones like myself. There are 8 of us. And the president was very excited about it, very supportive. So I think just given that level of support, we just recently had a letter signed by the top CEOs of 100 technology companies and automotive companies to House and Senate leadership, calling upon the passage. We passed this, authorized on the National Defense Authorization, the tax incentives, which I think are very, very important for certainty down the road, will be passed through reconciliation, and we believe the funding piece is going to pass. There are several vehicles, but we feel very optimistic.
And speaking of that optimism, Samsung, I hesitate to say that this is the first step because it's, they've already been in Austin and we already know how popular it is to at least look at Austin, if not invest. What happens, not what happens now, I guess, but how does this impact the short-term future for other investments? I mean, Samsung's a huge company that made this decision.
Well, their original operations are in my district in Austin. They expanded just north, of Austin. 17 billion will be the largest foreign direct investment in the United States, and really one of the largest investments in semiconductors. Intel will invest 20 billion, and so I think it's really it's showing that Central Texas, Austin's a real key player, and it has been in technology, a leader. And that with the Chips for America Act, the optimism around that, plus sort of the business-friendly environment in Texas, you're going to see, a lot more of these technology companies locating in the Austin area. And I think it's very exciting because it'll create a lot of jobs and opportunity for the economy. From my perspective, with my foreign affairs hat, it also protects our national security. These chips are the brains and everything from your phone to the most advanced weapon systems. When we saw China fire off the hypersonic missile that is more advanced than what we have, and we can't stop it with our missile defenses. We have to provide that technology here where it can't be compromised by China. That launch of the hypersonic is a real wake up call, I think, and it was really built on the backbone of American technology. And so that's really the way this whole thing started. Was in the previous administration, I had the National Security Advisor O'Brien come to me and talk about moving TSMC out of Taiwan, where 90% of these advanced chips are made, into Arizona. And then I talked with Secretary Wilbur Ross and Pompeo. Then I talked to the semiconductor industry about what do you need to incentivize you to expand and invest either in the United States or with our allied nations. And that's how we came up with the draft, the language that then was eventually passed on the NDAA, the Chips for America Act.
Speaking of tax incentives, obviously Taylor gave a lot of incentives for Samsung to move in there. Is there ever too many incentives? Is that within the realm of possibilities that whether it's a town, a county, etc., goes too far with their incentives where it maybe doesn't help as much as they hope it does?
Well, I think from an economic standpoint, it's very good. I mean, the largest tax receipts for Travis County come from Samsung in Austin. So it brings revenue in, it brings jobs and opportunities. But I do think, you're correct. I mean, this is not the normal, this is what they call industrial-based economics. We're trying to compete with China that is throwing $1 trillion in their digital economy. And to be competitive, this is kind of creative thinking that we have. I think the tax incentive was important in the grant program as well, but I don't think you want to do that for every business. The reason why we did it in this case is because advanced semiconductor chips are so important to our national security apparatus, to our the Pentagon, our advanced weapon systems. We got the Army Futures Command in Austin. This is very important to them, as well. So I think you have to COVID was an eye opener that we're too reliant on supply chain and medical, rare earth mineral, and advanced semiconductor chips. And so I think this model could apply for all three of those very, very important national security related items, to compete globally and protect, our national security. I wouldn't apply this model to just any type of business.
And you've been spearheading the CHIPS Act, semiconductors for a long time. Did you work closely with Congressman Carter about this as well? Just to at least, provide additional background information given your knowledge base.
Well, he's the beneficiary of the new the new expansion, and Taylor. We could talk about how that all came to be, but he's on appropriations, and that's going to be very important. Eventually this $52 billion grant program is going to pass on an appropriations bill. There's also a conference committee I'm on that involves what's called the Endless Frontiers that passed out of the Senate with the grant program, with Science and Technology and Foreign Affairs Committee, and with the CHIPS Act that I'll be participating. We think that could be a vehicle for the grant program. But the good news is I think the tax incentives are well on their way to passing. And for, the business community, they need that kind of certainty in the marketplace. The different, these fabrication plants are very capital intensive, very expensive. And when they're offered subsidies from other countries, we got to be able to compete with them on that. And this will help them. It's about 40% of that capital cost to build the fabrication plant. So I think it's a great advance for science, technology, for national security, and for our economy.
And even though this was in Taylor, it's not just going to affect Taylor, like you've mentioned. It's a whole rural community is going to be reaping the benefits of this. Do you see that stretching? I guess, how far do you see those benefits stretching?
Well, I think the economic benefits certainly cross the county line into Travis County and into Austin. Would I preferred it? You know, I mean, they had they could have expanded where they were located. I just think they got a better offer, from our county to the north. But I think overall, it's great for Central Texas. It means that um, Travis County is going to benefit greatly economically, from this expansion. And it's important to know it's just the very beginning. I mean, the 17 billion largest foreign investment in the United States, but that's just kind of like seed money right now. You're going to see that it could grow as large as $100 billion over time. And then when you look at force multiplier of Intel looking at Austin to do their fabrication plants, and Micron, these are some of the largest semiconductor manufacturers in the country, if not the world.
A couple last questions here. First off, the infrastructure bill that passed 2 weeks ago, I'm losing the track of time. How does that play into, not obviously Samsung, but just, building around it?
Well, right. So we, have a lot of money appropriated. Now that's the role of members of Congress, is to make sure that money gets back to the state of Texas and back to our districts. And so I think, look, Taylor's going to need a lot of infrastructure improvements. And I think Samsung's going to put a lot of money into that as well. I mean, the great thing about Samsung's going to, help with local education, with infrastructure. And then we also have the infrastructure bill itself. Austin clearly needs a lot of that money because we have to improve our road systems. It's traffic's getting worse, not better. And so, I'll be working with my colleagues in this area to get that money, back to the Austin area, and get the infrastructure where we need it.
And on top of that, not just the physical infrastructure of roads, electric, water, et cetera. One of the challenges that I've heard from various manufacturers is really about housing. Is there anything on the horizon from the federal government to assist with housing infrastructure, whether it's helping build neighborhoods or what have you?
I think there are some opportunities in the infrastructure bill to look at that. And I think affordable housing around these massive manufacturing plants is important. I think, you got Tesla, Elon Musk, and I know he's been working, but some of that's borne by the private sector as well. And I know in the case of Tesla, they're also looking at bearing some of the burden, cost sharing of that. I'm very interested in that one as well, because these batteries that they use in electric vehicles are primarily bought out of China, out of the Xinjiang province, where they commit genocide with forced slave labor. China not only advanced semiconductor, but rare earth minerals, critical minerals, have been harvested by China with Belt and Road Initiative in South America and in Africa, taken to China, and then the batteries are made there. It seems to me a better idea, and from a moral standpoint too, not to support a nation that commits genocide, is to, why not have those rare earth minerals, why not have those batteries manufactured either in the Austin area or perhaps in Central America or Latin America, where logistically it makes sense, but it also helps with our migration issue.
Okay, well, I think that's really the questions I had for you. Is there anything else you wanted to add about Samsung's announcement last week? What we could be seeing in the next few weeks, few months, even the next few years, because it's going to take at least 2 years to build it.
Well, I think you're going to see, Austin's already a technology hub, but I think You are seeing a lot of California companies expanding into the Austin area, and I think what I'd like to see is it become a semiconductor manufacturing hub for the nation. That would be ideal, and it's a perfect place to do it. And again, that's just it's great for advancements in technologies. It's great for the nation and our national security as well.